Hello and welcome to the Cyber Insurance News Podcast, hosted by our executive editor, Martin Hinton. In this installment, we tackle the complex matter of cyber insurance and security for the small business. And now, here's Martin Hinton.
Welcome to the first ever Cyber Insurance News Podcast. Joining me today is Jason Makevich. He is the founder and CEO of Greenlight Cyber. And on topic today for our conversation is something quite specific, but it's very, very large, and it's small business, cybersecurity, and insurance. I think it's probably not a surprise to anyone who might be hearing this that small businesses in America are a massive part of the economy, something like 99+% of businesses, and they employ just over 60 million people. So they're really, really important to the economy, and perhaps not the big names you might hear and think of when you think of the powerhouses of any economy. That makes them vulnerable. They are particularly vulnerable to cyber crime and attack. And what we're going to talk about today is that reality. And without any further ado, I'm going to bring Jason in to give me his sort of, first off glance of or thought about the issue and the topic with regard to cybersecurity. So Jason, please tell me what you think about this.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me. So you're right. So, small businesses are just a massive part of our economy, but also think of just all the people that we know. And chances are most of the people we know, at least maybe around half, maybe more, are working at small businesses or own small businesses, right? So think of the livelihoods then that are impacted based on each of these small businesses and overall that small business market. You've got millions and millions of people, and therefore that many households, that many families, and so cyber risk has gotten so dangerous in terms of the impact on organizations that these families, these individual employees with their whole families, and the businesses themselves are so vulnerable, not only to, oh no, our data's stolen or we can't get on our systems. No, this is the impact on the business is such that the livelihoods of these people is vulnerable. It's in jeopardy. And so that's why I've made it my mission in my career to do all I can with the resources we have here at Greenlight to help as many small businesses as we can.
One of the things we talked about when we were discussing this podcast and kicking around ideas was this notion that smaller enterprises don't view themselves as vulnerable. So I want to table that notion for a second because we'll accept that as fact. One of the interesting things you said to me is that they often consider the security part of their digital operations as a function of IT, and that's a mistake, that it's an entirely separate thing. And in thinking about contextualizing that, it's a bit like saying that the person who might repair the fence around a warehouse or the hinges on a door is part of your security team. No, that's just maintenance. And I wonder whether you might sort of explain to me how those two things are differentiated in a way that people can sort of understand how it is. Again, the big burden now is there's more money to be spent, but how are those two things separate, not quite the same? And the way people see them.
I could spend an hour on this one, but I'll try not to. So yeah, you can come up with a ton of analogies. Really, we have a term called secure by design, and so the idea would be that all IT folks, software developers, infrastructure folks, to C-level CIOs and everyone in between. Everything they do is based upon principles of security. However, the challenge is, go back to, the timeline of information technology as we know it in the digital era. We're only going back a few decades, several decades, let's say. But in that timeline, cybersecurity, other than at maybe some government agencies and some top, companies with very, very valuable intellectual property. Other than those, cybersecurity was kind of an afterthought or not even a thought at all in so many cases. I spent a great deal of my career as a network engineer in the IT space, where even in the most formal of training and the most advanced of training around network engineering, security rarely came up. It was such a tiny little piece. And only in the last 5 to 10 years has it really made a big shift. So most IT professionals are not trained in cybersecurity and don't quite understand it. And I'll be honest, I didn't either many years ago. I moved from, kind of pivoted from information technology infrastructure as a specialty into cybersecurity. And it's taken a lot to skill up to the level that I'm at, and they're continually learning every single day. So that's the biggest gap. And so therefore, the assumption that, oh, well, IT has it handled is terribly dangerous. I would also say there's a huge gap between business and IT that's been there forever. We've been, so many people try to bridge that gap through their careers, but the gap between business and cyber risk is even greater, and that gap is more dangerous than ever. So it's not just something that IT and that whole kind of technical element needs to deal with. This is a business risk, organizational risk, and IT needs to be an element of it, but there needs to be professionals in the organization or outsourced that know how to bridge those gaps and work with IT and work with business.
Well, what would you say to a small business owner who's of the mindset, which I know we discussed, that I'm so small it's not going to happen to me? And I know we can get into statistics and that the events and well-documented events bear out that that's not actually the case. But we tend to live in bubbles, and human narcissism and a sense that it won't happen to me, the teenager in all of us. What would you say to someone who is of the opinion that they don't need the sort of robust, even basic cybersecurity for their company? What would you tell them that to make them pause and reconsider their perspective?
Well, first off, I would say that mindset is terribly dangerous, and the impact. You have to understand the impact of these things. So, if you were to even suggest that it was a low probability, understanding the impact would shift that. But my job is not only to help businesses understand the impact, but to also understand that their perception of the probability is generally way off. The newsworthy events are never going to be about small businesses. And most small businesses don't even need to report that they've been attacked, so the statistics out there are really not particularly accurate at all. Insurance companies might have better stats than others, but there's a lot of small businesses that don't have cyber insurance or don't use it in certain cases. So unfortunately, the data is not really there in a way where it can maybe move that needle. But things have changed. Those small business owners were right for a long time. Other than malware, viruses, you don't really have to worry too much about it. But that's not the case anymore. And it hasn't been the case for the last probably 5 to 7 years or so, I would say, with the advent of ransomware and then ransomware as a service, with the proliferation of phishing campaigns and just how susceptible humans are.
Let me interrupt you there, because one of the things that might be helpful is we hear these phrases, and even people who might think that they're not vulnerable hear ransomware and they hear business email compromise or BEC. This business loves its acronyms. Take me through a couple of the examples of the threat and how it unfolds and how a business can lose financially, lose reputation. Business interruption is a big thing that I think people don't perceive. You think that the ransomware might take a day or two, and it can often take much, much longer to bring everything back online. And if you're reliant on that data or the information that's been ransomed, it's a prolonged problem, not unlike having a flood wash away, the patio that you make half your money at a restaurant at. Take me through a couple of the big, 2 or 3 of the specific types of crime that people should be concerned about.
I'm going to start with ransomware because we see that as the most devastating overall to organizations. And Yeah, the average downtime. The last statistic I heard of average downtime of a ransomware event for a small business was 19 days. That's average. 19 days down. That's average, right? So that means that half of them are more than that. But that downtime isn't at all of it, right? That's just a piece of it. So think of it this way. Ransomware was one of those evil genius sort of things that came up where these threat actors, what we call, hackers, they came up with a way to be able to monetize their skills pretty much anywhere. Again, they used to hack, maybe the NSA, FBI, CIA, all those things, DoD, or maybe, some big companies or whatever. And they might do it nation-state attacks, espionage, or maybe just reputation in that space. Like, look who I got. That's not the case anymore. Now with ransomware, the idea is you have cyber criminals. So these aren't necessarily even skilled hackers. It's just criminals with a computer. That's all it takes now, because they can go in, especially with ransomware as a service. They're basically going to go onto what's called the dark web. They're going to sign up for basically subscribe to kind of a software as a service type of thing, but it's ransomware as a service. And with a few clicks, they can have a bunch of emails sent out, just like any email marketer would, but these are phishing campaigns. And they just wait and collect the money. That's pretty much kind of their role. Now, there are other pieces to it, but because of that, and because ransomware in and of itself, what it does is it doesn't matter as much to these cyber criminals how valuable your data is out there in the world. What matters is how valuable your data is to you. Right? It's ransom. It's like kidnapping, right? Those kids might not be that valuable to other people, but boy, to the parents, they're very valuable, and it's kind of the idea of ransomware. So if you can never get your data back unless you pay some exorbitant amount of money to the bad guys, you're kind of left with no options.
I think
that's how ransomware has gotten so
one
bad.
thing that I'd like to touch on and emphasize it, and I think this is when we discuss the breadth of the danger, the breadth of the risk, even for smaller businesses, is that to become a cyber criminal who does ransomware and phishing emails, the barrier for entry to that job, if you will, is very, very low, right? So that means that there's an enormous number of people who can enter this globally as a function of the way the internet works, right? They could be anywhere on the planet and be targeting 500 businesses a day in, say, the 48 states of America that are, that is, there's a lot of potential there. And is that one of the things that makes them more vulnerable? Because these people don't care who they steal from, right?
That's exactly right. And that's a great point, because they're not targeting you, okay? They're not targeting your dry cleaner shop or your investment banking firm, right? They're not targeting the company. What they're doing is they're casting a wide net, phishing, right? So there's a lot of analogies around that, but they're casting this massive net. So they just get these email lists. So if your company has people with email addresses, you're vulnerable because they're just getting these lists, they're sending these emails out. Now with AI, those emails have gotten pretty good at evading even some of the best email security, email filtering. So a lot of those come into the inbox. You still want to invest a lot into email filtering, email security, and going with kind of next generation solutions there to have the best chance of using AI to fight AI, right? Don't use the legacy stuff anymore. It's just not enough. But you also need to train everyone, right? Because otherwise, the likelihood of something happening is much higher. But it's always going to be.
Let me interrupt there, because even now, with all the filtering software and all the multi-factor authentications, the number one cause of a cyber crime, or what makes you the victim, is something that starts with human error, right? So for small business,
starts with human error.
So for small businesses, the owner, the boss, the leader, being the person who says, "Oh, this is a problem," that is a cultural sort of reality that they need to set within their organization of 50 or 100 or 250 employees.
Yeah.
And then once you've established that culture, like this is a threat to us, and that means it's a threat to you and a threat to our business, which is something we should all be wary of, just like we wouldn't leave important files on the bus or not lock our door at night. That mindset is the first step, which is kind of what we've been touching on. But then within that, being cyber secure is a perishable reality. And this is where I think one of the things that becomes quite difficult for small businesses is we are quite now literally talking about an additional line in the budget. Right? This is something that is, going to become very important, but again, not unlike making sure your alarm is monitored or whatever it might be. This is, again, a cultural shift that is part of the upside, or the downside, I suppose, the downside of the frictionless or much less friction-filled environment that digital commerce allows. So take me through sort of, this is something you do, and we sort of want to transition away from the fear mongering, because we can always make people scared. That's generally quite easy to do. Most of them are probably aware that there's danger out there. But what I'd love to do is sort of start to transition into how you address this if, let's say, you're a small business that knows you've got an issue and you want to do something about it. We talked about a crawl, walk, run mentality when we sort of chatted about this conversation. How do you sort of make that transition if you see this or you become aware of the issue and you think, okay, I can't not do this. This needs to happen now. What would you recommend? And I know you're in the service, so you do this for a living, so it's small commercial. How do you guys go? How do you guys go about it, particularly when you're dealing with companies that are like, because there's the fair argument, hey, this is going to cost more, but you're getting something in return. But sometimes when it's not, if you will, a profit stream or a revenue stream, it becomes it's a bridge. It's a hurdle. How do you address it? What do you do?
I mean, I'm a business owner too. I started my company in 2010. I hate spending money. It's not fun, and especially if it's not going to turn into revenue or be an investment in our people or our clients in a direct way. And so you have to look at it as you are investing in this. You have to shift that mindset where you're investing in the resiliency of your business. It's not the resiliency of your IT, it's your business. Because you have to understand the impact of this is so severe. Just go look at the statistics. I mean, small businesses often go out of business right after a ransomware event. I think it's over 60% or something like that. I'd like people to do their own research on that, but the data's there. And so how we go about it, the first thing is helping business leaders understand, again, that your IT, enable them to be great at IT and get them so involved in cybersecurity as a component of it. Business leaders also need to be very involved around cyber risk management. I would argue, I know many in the industry do, that cyber risk is now the top #1 risk to most businesses. That's huge, considering you can only manage risk if you understand it well and make those well-informed decisions. And I would implore any small business leader to ask themselves, do I understand it well enough? Because chances are there's more that you need to know, more you need to understand. So that you can invest in the resiliency of your business.
You touch on something so you mentioned earlier that small businesses don't have to report like, say, a publicly traded company has to report to the SEC a violation within several days. One of the things we see in the data, which is, as you noted, there's a slightly greater body of it with regard to the larger corporations, is the detachment from both the C-suite level and the board level at some large companies. So it's kind of important to remember that this mindset isn't entirely a small company mindset. It's not uncomplicated. It is a big new problem, and there is sometimes reticence to sort of dive into the challenge. And the message here is quite simple in some respects. This threat is real, just like you would have fire insurance or theft insurance, depending on your business, or put locks or security cameras on. This is something that needs to be in that mindset now, and that's just the facts. It's the sun coming up tomorrow and setting at the end of the day. Is it that simple? You just have to get over your reticence and find companies that you like, or bring in people that you trust, and make sure that Is there a simplicity to it?
There can be, yeah. The first thing to do once you've kind of accepted, okay, this is a new reality, and we do need to invest in the resiliency of our business, and we need to not just assume that our great IT folks are have it all covered. Also know that, yeah, while our employees clicking on a phishing email or some sort of type of social engineering like that is the most common vector, it takes more than that. And really what we see is this, I mean, over probably 95% of cases are a combination of our users doing something and something not configured properly in your environment. When I say properly, I mean properly secured. So secure by design, very important. If your IT folks aren't specifically cybersecurity professionals with certifications and with experience and all that, well, then don't get rid of them. Just bring in, a company like ours that can partner with the business leadership, with the IT department or team or outsourced folks, because it's good to have that third party look at things. And we can be very objective that way and work with the business, work with IT. And going back to that crawl, walk, run, it's unlikely that any business most of the time can just jump into run. All of a sudden you go from sitting down to running, right? You gotta start slower. So we recognize that. The way we approach it is, we assess, we recommend, we kind of build very customized recommendations, and then we create entry paths to start from. So if you want to go all the way to run and follow all our recommendations, we can deploy all our solutions in a few weeks or whatever, continually working with the business and IT. It doesn't go away. It's an ongoing thing. Or we can create other entry paths to get started. And whether it's us or someone else out there, I would just encourage every business leader out there, every small, mid-sized business leader especially, to ask for some referrals, talk to people you trust, but ultimately make sure you're dealing with cybersecurity professionals, because it's just so important today.
So a couple of things we talked about. One, and I know this isn't your area, but with regard to cyber insurance, a lot of companies don't have it, even larger ones. In the context of security, where does the insurance element of the cyber risk fall into the picture for you?
I would put it in terms of resiliency, right? So you're investing in resiliency, and with insurance, you're transferring some of that risk, right? You're saying, look, we need to be able to survive an event. There's no such thing as 100% security. I mean, you could unplug the internet and go back to typewriters, maybe that'll help. But the reality is, something's gonna happen. Our job is to try to keep it from happening, and also to minimize the impact of it happening, and making sure that the recoverability is gonna be appropriate too. Insurance is a key element. I mean, you got to be able to afford dealing with these things. If, God forbid, there is a ransomware event, how are you going to pay for it? It could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for a small business, and go up from there. So yeah, insurance is critical. I would encourage 100% of businesses, period, to have a cyber insurance policy. Go talk to your broker. Find a cyber insurance broker that specializes in it. Make sure you're doing your due diligence. And I always recommend find a good attorney who understands this stuff, and partner up with that attorney. Let them help you through that journey, because there's a whole lot of things that you're not going to know. We're not going to know when it comes to how that whole world operates. I mean, we help our clients review their policies and everything from certain elements, but ultimately, we always defer to counsel.
You touch on something interesting. I've spoken to some attorneys in the last couple of months, and they have been working in this field for a decade plus. And what they say is that the declaration pages of the policy have gone from a page or two to these massive, huge parts of it. And again, it's not it's not uncomplicated, right? I mean, one of the things that I'd love to be able to say to the audience, and oh, it's easy, you just have to find someone, but there is a real gap in quality and knowledge within even the security space that you have to be your own, you do your own due diligence and look into this. The insurance companies that I've looked at, some of them offer sort of dual platform, right? Where they'll help you with the security part of it to make you a good risk, which brings obviously business in. When you're looking for someone in your line of work or someone to help companies raise their standards and become more secure, what are a couple of questions or telltales or things that business owners should look for? Even if there were a couple of questions they would ask that help them sort of, know, okay, this person seems to know what they're doing. Even if it's something specific like qualifications, you mentioned training and certifications. What are a couple of things that people could ask to get a sense of this, if this is someone that understands we're going into, if you will, and this may be a bit hyperbolic, but it's not entirely, we're going into battle together against a real threat to this company and others.
It very much is that in a lot of ways, and a great question, because our industry, when I was in the kind of more IT industry and kind of shifting into cyber several years ago, it was kind of at the forefront of that, but we did it how I would say the right way. We hired the talent and we skilled up our talent, right? So we did it both ways to get to that level, and it took years to get to where we are. Now we're seeing that all these IT companies, these MSPs, they're now all of a sudden just calling themselves security experts because they have a few products that they can sell. They have an antivirus that they can sell. They have an email filter they could sell, and then they're like, hey, we're cyber. And that's so dangerous because if they don't have that expertise, that experience, and fundamental knowledge, the principles of cybersecurity, it's going to be a problem. I would say, ask for certain certifications, and you can look up some of them online and kind of get a sense of what it takes to, how much have they invested in cyber? How long have they been doing cyber? And is cybersecurity the main thing they do at that company? Is that their main service?
Again, sometimes you hear digital, you hear cyber, and you think it's this whole new world. But basically, you're talking about it like you would approach any kind of new arrangement or new deal with a new vendor. You want to do your due diligence, talk to other customers, if you will, quote unquote, check their Yelp review, right? You have to do this, but that information is available. But there is this new layer, a new piece of pie to add to your life that is work. One of the other things we chatted about is, given the scale and the value to the American economy that small businesses represent, is the idea that beyond the tax relief that you get for a business expense, like new cybersecurity or whatever it might be, the idea of perhaps tax credits to elevate or some kind of standard, which is one of the issues, right? What is safe? There isn't even a real answer to that. What is secure? What is reasonable levels of security in the cyberspace? It varies from industry, but that answer isn't really out there for people. Is it, or is there sort of a?
There are some resources, a lot of resources. Center of Internet Security, CIS. They've done so much to try and help companies. Cyber Readiness Institute is another. Here in Southern California, we have a nonprofit that I'm a board member of called Secure the Village. We're trying to help businesses and nonprofits be more secure. And there's so many other organizations out there. NIST being the more standards organization, building the frameworks and really trying to elevate the game. So you have that, but to incentivize small businesses to invest in their cyber resiliency, I would advocate. We need to do like we did for R&D or something, where there's some tax credits or something, because really this helps. This would be good for the U.S. economy. This would be good for keeping unemployment down and other things, because ultimately the more small businesses get hit, the more transfer of money from our economy to these cyber criminals, and the more devastation of these small businesses and all the families that that are involved. I mean, all these employees and all their families, like they very often go out of business, and the founders, the owners lose everything, and it is total devastation.
You touch on something there that again, the loss to a small business might be in the tens of thousands, but it's widely
more.
What more? But it's widely cited the scale of this problem and the value of what can be taken from the digital economy. The number that you hear for 2025 is $10.5 trillion, and I wonder whether or not, given that damage, and obviously wealthier nations and wealthier economies are going to pay a bigger percentage of that $10.5 trillion. We have standards for, say, automobile safety and airbags and seatbelts. Do we think that there might be a need to address some sort of at least baseline national standard for what secure is? And I'm not going to get into advocating for the government to come in with rules and regulations or whether that's good or bad. But when you look at the national economy being part of national security, there is an element of it that matters there. And obviously we have federal and governmental levels, and then state by state. Some states like California have a more robust approach to it because of the tech industry, and that makes complete sense. But if you will, the internet doesn't care about your borders, right? You can, as we've discussed, commit these crimes from anywhere, and having a secure sort of holistic sort of landscape for a national economy. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, and I guess I'm wondering, whether that's something you think that the marketplace will take care of, or whether you think that it needs a little push.
There's a lot of things already in movement. I mean, you got FTC safeguards that affects tons of companies. I mean, automotive dealerships that do financing are considered FTC regulated now, and are subject to those FTC safeguards, as an example, right? So we're starting to see more and more. You mentioned California; that's more data privacy, but the fundamental element of that is cybersecurity, and you have to have reasonable cybersecurity to be able to enforce the privacy of data. I would say, more regulations to a degree would be really good, but I would say this: the regulation should be, we should be doing more around regulating software companies, hardware manufacturers, Internet of Things, device makers, those that design the systems that we use. It's interesting when you subscribe to any sort of software as a service platform, but do you have to pay extra to get the extra security features? It's like, why? How is that allowed?
Yeah.
If you're going to put something out there, why should it have to cost me more to make it more secure? Just design it securely to begin with, and help me with that. So it's that type of thing we see a lot of. It's become kind of normal. We've normalized having to pay extra for these things. So I'd love to see that change and help small businesses and really, every organization be more secure by design. And then, I think just saying, hey, if you're going to invest in things like cyber resiliency, that's going to help our economy. That's going to help, all of these, macro things. So therefore, there's room there for our government to come up with ways to incentivize businesses to use that money to invest in that resiliency.
All right, well, I want to wrap up now, and in preparation for this, I came across an anecdote to give you an indication, and I wanted to share it with you and the audience. It was about a car theft involving a hack, and it was a Lamborghini that was stolen, and it was owned by a baseball player, and they hacked the transport company and changed the delivery address, and that was how they gained the car. So they didn't go up and use some device to unlock it electronically and start it electronically. They just changed the sender address, and it arrived where it shouldn't have been. And it wasn't a one-off. It's happened before. So it is, these a car transport company, even an exotic car transport company. This is an example of a small business, and Lamborghinis. I don't own one, but I hear they're quite expensive, and that's a huge headache, right? That's not what you want your business known. If your business is in transport, taking something and getting it from A to B, and you end up taking it inadvertently to C because of a business email compromise, which is apparently how this one happened, you've got a real issue, right? Because there are a lot of people who do that for a living, and someone who's got a high-profile failure is going to suffer the consequences.
In some ways, though, Martin, that happens every single day, and it might not be Lamborghinis, it might be your invoices to one of your customers, where those get hijacked by the threat actors, and now your customers are paying the criminals instead of you. How do you recover that money? You can't ask the customers to pay again. Do you have insurance, and is that going to cover it? Has your counsel reviewed that insurance to make sure that it would cover it? Do you have systems in place to prevent those things from happening, or at least help make it really hard for someone to do that, right? These are the things business leaders need to be thinking about and working with the right professionals to make sure they're doing the right things for their company and for their employees.
Well, I think that's a really good place to stop. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or any other thoughts you wanted to share?
It's been a pleasure. I'm happy to be a resource for you or anyone out there that just hope to make a difference.
Well, Jason Makevich with Greenlight Cyber, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it, and I suspect this won't be the last time we talk, and I really do enjoy it. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and stand by, because we'll have other episodes in the future.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Cyber Insurance News Podcast. You can find us on the web at cyberinsurancenews.org. And please subscribe and follow us here so you are updated on new episodes. Enjoy the day.